We got that property under contract for $5 million. It was a 10-story office building. While we had it under contract, these developers who had another project right down the street approached us and said, hey guys, we've been looking at that building for the last 3 years, and we had this vision to convert it into a hotel. Would you guys want to partner together somehow? Well, long story short, we ended up selling them the property. In the course of selling that for $7.3 million, by the way, and we closed within an 18-month period. So our investors got a 50% ROI within 18 months. Someone asked me recently if I could rewind 10 years and begin at that point to do what I'm doing now, would I do that? And part of me wants to say yes, because like all of us, when we say, I wish I knew then what I know now, but the reality is, I think my steps have been ordained and my path has been created so that I was able to accumulate a specific set of experience and skills that now allow me to do what I do.
Hey guys, it's Mark Cedros. Welcome to another M1 Member Highlight. Today I have two distinguished gentlemen with me here today. We've got Michael and Christian. They are the co-founders and partners of Redeem Investments. Both Michael and Christian are West Point grads. If you don't know what West Point is, just Google it, and the landing page will make you want to do push-ups. It is an incredibly hard to get into, hard to get out of school with everything together. And Michael, Christian, welcome to the interview.
Thanks, Marcin. Really, really grateful to be here. It's our honor, and looking forward to having a conversation. Yeah, it's funny. I've heard hard to get into, which we can attest to. I've not heard hard to get out of, but that's a true statement as well.
Get out of intact. When I first met y'all, I Googled it and I saw the videos of everybody running and doing push-ups. I'm like, man, I got to go to the gym. So tell us a little bit about yourselves. Like I know we were talking before we hit play here, but you and Michael, the two of you guys have known each other for a while, and then you ended up in school together, or how did that come together?
Yeah, I'll go first, and then Michael can fill in here. So Michael and I share our Filipino heritage. I actually was born in the Philippines. I'm a first-generation immigrant. I always tell people I was born on a dirt floor in a third world country and came to the United States right before I turned 7. Learned to speak English watching cartoons like Fat Albert and Garfield and Friends, and really it's an interesting story. And I have no questions as to whether I'm supposed to be where I am, simply because I got here by divine intervention, I think. And so that's sort of the beginnings of my story. In coming here, I wanted to really achieve kind of the full potential of what it is to be an American. So I learned about this thing called the American Dream, and so started to really heavily pursue that. In the course of that, I learned about real estate, did all the things, read Kiyosaki's book, the whole thing, and then ultimately decided that, man, if I'm going to truly express my gratitude for being able to come to this country, I want to serve in some capacity. And so I had the opportunity to go to West Point and serve in the military, played football there, did well enough to be on the team. And then ultimately, because of all the injuries I sustained playing football and being in the military, I ended up being drawn to and called to be in healthcare, which I did for almost 20 years before I made the transition from healthcare to wealth care, using commercial real estate as the platform to do that. And so I can speak more about what that looks like now with regards to where we are with real estate, but that's sort of my story up until how I got into real estate. So, Michael.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, Christian and I didn't actually know each other back at school. We met probably close to like 18 years after we graduated at a real estate conference specifically for West Point graduates. So once we started talking to one another, we both realized we were both in multifamily. We both had careers we were in, but we weren't, maybe fully fulfilled or feeling the impact that we wanted to make being realized. And so we were both doing commercial real estate as a side hustle. Both realized that we probably wanted to maybe take a stab at doing the commercial real estate thing full time. We were both successful in our own regard with regards to doing the commercial real estate deals. And so I took a leap of faith. He's out of Austin, Texas. I'm in Denver, Colorado. We were both investing in our respective geographies. I'm actually originally from Dallas, Texas, and have a soft spot in my heart for, investors, family, friends that I have down in Texas still. And so wanted to expand to Texas, and that led us to where we are today with Redeem Investments. We've since pivoted out of multifamily, and we can talk about that here in a little bit. But we're doing other things now at Redeem Investments, but we're really excited about what we're doing.
I got to ask you guys the obvious question, because you go from, serving your country and doing all the things, and, going into the corporate world or the medical world, and then that transition to now working on 8 and 9-figure deals. Like, what has that been like? Because that's a shift, right? You're not just flipping houses anymore. You're at a different level.
Yeah, someone asked me recently if I could rewind 10 years and begin at that point to do what I'm doing now, would I do that? And part of me wants to say yes, because like all of us, when we say, I wish I knew then what I know now. But the reality is, I think my steps have been ordained, and my path has been created so that I was able to accumulate a specific set of experience and skills that now allow me to do what I do. And so absent of that, I couldn't say that, I'd be able to do these 7-8 figure deals that you're talking about, Marcin, and be able to, be judicious about how we make data-driven decisions and how we look at the world, and, how we mitigate risk and things like that. Like I wasn't as good as I am now 10 years ago at those things. And so, yeah, it's really fascinating how sort of life takes you through ups and downs and windy roads in order to arrive where you are. But yeah, I would say it's the accumulation of those experiences and now our developed expertise with regards to identifying, prospective buildings that have a different original use. And now through something called adaptive reuse, we're able to pivot and shift that from an office to a hotel or to a medical office building and things of that nature. So it's really exciting stuff that we're into now, but it's been a journey.
Just curious, before we get into what, Redeem is working on today and what the future looks like, what was that first big deal that you guys took on? And, everybody remembers their first big deal, right? So walk us through that. What did it look like? What were the lessons? How did it work out for you? Just kind of give us some context there.
I think a jumping off point that I'll say that Michael and I did collectively together, because as he mentioned earlier, each of us respectively were successful doing what we were doing, but then we joined forces. And the first deal that we tackled when we did that was actually something that neither of us were doing prior to that, which was an office building. And really depending on where you are and where you live and what market you're in, offices generally aren't doing great, but even worse in some markets than others. And interestingly, we had a relationship, someone who's the president of the Economic Development Corporation in a local area here in Texas, that approached us and said, hey guys, we know that you do multifamily, or that's what you typically do, but we have this office building in the middle of our core business district, and we're undergoing some major revitalization. We've got Meta building a $1 billion data center. We've got these other companies that are relocating here from internationally, as well as from California or the East Coast, and we just need something else done with this building. Would you mind coming and take a look, tour it, and just see what you think? It wasn't even listed for sale, Marcin. It was owned by a regional bank. We toured it. Oh, wow. They were leasing up the space, and ultimately we asked the broker, hey, do you think that the owners would be willing to sell this? And they said, I don't know, make an offer. And so we did. And the really cool part about that is we got it under contract for a certain price that, while we had it under contract, and I'll talk specific numbers here because we've already, sort of disposed of that, but we got that property under contract for $5 million. It was a 10-story office building. While we had it under contract, these developers who had another project right down the street approached us and said, hey guys, we've been looking at that building for the last 3 years, and we had this vision to convert it into a hotel. Would you guys want to partner together somehow? Well, long story short, we ended up selling them the property. In the course of selling for $7.3 million, by the way. And we closed within an 18-month period. So our investors got a 50% ROI within 18 months, which is huge. And so what they asked us to do is to stay on board as a joint venture partner, and then to allow our investors from the first transaction to roll their capital into the next transaction. And that's exactly what we've done. And so we're now in the midst of that project. We should be closing our construction loan here in a matter of weeks, and we'll be turning that into a Courtyard Marriott hotel. So that's the first sort of big deal that Michael and I did together. And he's been super helpful. I mean, him and his role has allowed me sort of the freedom and the flexibility to do a lot of other stuff in terms of acquisitions and relationship building, strategic kind of partnerships and things. And Michael handles really a lot of the day-to-day and just makes our company go. So it's been a great partnership.
Excellent. So you actually read my mind. I was going to ask, how did the two of y'all determine to be partners? And it sounds like, you've kind of delineated the work where Michael, you're kind of behind the scenes, you're making sure everything connects, everything plugs in. And as I like to put it, Christian goes out and makes promises and then you make sure they can fulfill on them. Right. So
I mean, honestly, that's exactly what
wow, I think I
happens.
got it.
I mean, I do all the hard work, heavy lifting, and he takes credit for it, right? So, no, but
As it should
I'm
be.
sure a lot of you guys have read the book Traction, and you've heard about, and perhaps maybe even Rocket Fuel, where you've heard about the visionary integrator relationship. I mean, we weren't familiar with that concept really when we first got together, but as we started getting further along in our business, I had several people tell us about that relationship and that book and the entrepreneurial operating system, and lo and behold, I mean, I think we just realized that, hey, like he's the visionary and I'm the integrator, and I mean that's how we kind of make things move forward and progress. And since we've decided we're going to have those very specific roles, I mean our growth trajectory has just been amazing, over the last handful of years.
Well, it's been really cool watching you guys kind of develop and nurture, and you go through the same process most entrepreneurs do when you go from 600 when you go from that 6-figure to 7-figure entrepreneur. It's one set of problems, then 7 figures to 8 figures. It's a different multitude of those similar problems. But that next phase, hopefully for you guys, is going to be when you go from that 8 to 9 figures, because then you're operating at scale, and the processes that are involved with raising tens of millions to operate hundreds of millions in assets, that's another evolution of itself. So it's really cool that you guys have early in your process identified the relationship with the visionary and the integrator, because I know a lot of people, they end up working together because they're just friends or whatever, but they're both visionaries, or worse, they're both integrators, or and then eventually one of you becomes redundant, right? So it's really cool that you guys have sorted that out.
Well, so, and
That's
Martin, to add to that, if I may, I mean, truth be told, Michael and I could very well, our roles could be interchangeable, meaning he could very well serve as the visionary for our organization, and I in turn as the integrator. I prefer my role, just because I think I'm better at it now than I was at the beginning, and Michael's probably too humble to say that he's just really excellent at what he does, and so because of the fit of what we both like to do and what we're good at, and having the humility, both of us, to sort of understand our roles and do that, and then still have kind of overlap, and being able to cover one another, and sort of in the military we call it being back to back, yeah, it's just been really exciting to be working together.
I think whether it's in the military or professional sports or any other environment where you have a group of guys or gals working together for a common goal, everybody eventually learns how to check their ego at the door and just kind of focus on the mission, right? So it's really cool. And from your investor standpoint, they probably see that as well. I mean, they see a group of guys that are aligned, moving in a certain direction, and I'm sure that whether it's the commercial real estate brokers or the financing people that you're attracting, they probably see that collective vision as well, and that probably helps you guys get deal flow on top of everything else. Michael made the comment about the pivot or the transition into the larger assets and with what you guys are working on today. So can you kind of walk me through that thought process? Because you didn't just wake up one day and envision it, right? You have 20 years of this healthcare experience. So what was the light bulb moment where you were like, hey, like this is actually a really big opportunity for us that because of my relationships, we're uniquely equipped to capitalize on?
Yeah, I think especially through our military training, you sort of learn how to anticipate sort of what may happen, right? And reading the landscape and understanding how things are shifting. And so we do that. In I think most operators, sort of worth their salt, that know what they're doing, are trying to assess, based on demographic changes, the macro environmental factors and other things, how does that then impact what our business model is, and should we continue to do what we're doing, or should we make pivots? And really, that's the situation we found ourselves in. And so we found ourselves tracking two major demographic changes, demographic trends. The first is something called the hybrid workforce revolution. And for those who may not know what that means, it's this whole notion of people, companies particularly, no longer leasing 10, 20, 30,000 square feet within an office building. Part of that is driven by the fact that people want the flexibility to work from home. A lot of that was spurred on by this little thing that happened called COVID. And as a result of that, buildings that were once thriving, jam-packed, full of people, full of life, just aren't. There's ghost towns. And so it's presenting a really interesting and unique opportunity for those who are willing to pursue it, in that buildings, office buildings in particular, there's a good number of them that are either vacant or underutilized, right?
Yeah.
That's the demographic trend. So we started asking, well, what could that be used for? What opportunities does that present? The second trend that we started tracking was the silver tsunami, right? And so for those who are in, multifamily, focused on senior housing, for example, it's a very big thing. You know well what that means. But for somebody like me who spent nearly 20 years in healthcare, also knows what it means from a medical standpoint. And what it means is that there are people right now, 1 out of every 5 Americans is over the age of 65.
Mhm.
And that number continues to grow. As that number grows, more people are aging, they're getting sicker the longer that they live. And so what happens is, at least in America, where we've industrialized healthcare, there are long waits for people to be seen by specialists. And a lot of that is driven by the fact that there's just not adequate amount of capacity with physical medical real estate. And so what we've said is, well, what if these office buildings that are vacant could be converted into medical office in order to be able to care for these aging parents and grandparents that we all care about? That would be revolutionary. And so that's in fact what we've started to do, is take office buildings and convert them into medical office. We've created a fund behind that investment thesis called the Redemption Armor Fund. Redemption because the name of our company is Redeem Investments. And so there's obvious spiritual connotations there that we believe in, because we're a faith-driven company. Many of our projects have been named with redemption in it. So Redemption Square, Sweet Redemption, Redemption Tower, for example. ARMOR stands for Adaptive Reuse and Medical Office Realty. Part of it is because we like acronyms, being, having been in the military. Michael used to be an armor officer, so driving tanks and mechanized vehicles and things, and had a lot of fun doing that. But we also see that our investment thesis is defensive in nature, right? So if we're buying office buildings at below, replacement cost significantly, 20 to 30 cents on the dollar, that's a significant hedge of protection, a moat around our investment. Even with the construction costs and everything else, if we're still 50 to 60% of replacement cost, that's a significant value. That allows us to be highly competitive with the way that we price, either average daily rate in hotels, leases. We can charge below market lease and still generate significant profits, for example. And so in most cases, what we'll do is we'll buy an office building and we'll convert it into a medical office. In certain cases where that building has a better use, a higher and better use as a different property type, like a hotel, for example, then we'll convert it to that. We know that there is the high demand for that asset if the local municipality is willing to partner with us. And when I say partner, that means write us a check or offer property tax abatement or some other incentive to build or renovate a property to their liking. And really, that's what we ended up doing with that first property that I mentioned earlier, Marcin, that 10-story office building. We're converting it to a hotel, and the city is writing us a significant check, a grant, plus 10 years of property tax abatement in order to support that project. So that's what we've done, is we've created this investment fund, primarily acquiring office buildings in order to convert to medical office, but also other asset classes that may be of high demand within local communities.
What comes first? Is it the chicken or the egg? And what I mean by that is, are you finding the tenants? Are you finding the buildings? Are you finding them at the same time? Because what you guys are talking about is a different spin on the real estate sector. A lot of people are familiar with multifamily or storage or whatever. But when you're doing medical or office, you're dealing hopefully with triple net leases, and you've got a different dynamic there. So how are you leveraging, I guess, your experience and your contacts and your network to mitigate risk and make sure you're making good bets in that regard?
Yeah, that's a perfect question. I think that what I'll say in response, in large part, as a risk mitigation factor, we're not buying any buildings naked, right? It has to have some type of agreement in place, whether that's a franchise agreement with one of the top hotel brands, because that's the intended and use for it. Whether it's a partnership agreement with the likes of Regis. So I don't know if you're familiar with
Oh,
Regis.
they do the small offices and yeah, that.
Yeah, think short-term rentals for office. So it's interesting. Let me pause there real quick. In the markets that have the highest office vacancy is also where companies like Regis are thriving, and they have
Mm.
the highest level of performance, because what they're doing is they're taking these office buildings that would otherwise remain vacant, and now they're operating short-term rentals out of that space.
Right, because the building's empty anyway, so they put the TIs in, they take the risk on the renovations, but they get a sweetheart deal on the rent, right? So,
Yeah, and there's a partnership. So the property owner is the one, acquiring the property, fitting out the space
oh,
for
I see.
years.
Okay.
So they're taking on that risk, but the end result is, the revenues that they generate is typically, 30 to 40% premium above and beyond traditional lease rates. And so there's either a partnership agreement with them, a franchise agreement with Regent, or with one of the hotel brands, or having an absolute or a triple net lease for at least 10 years with an
Mhm.
operator. Those are the conditions under which we're willing to buy property.
Yeah, it's so funny that you guys talk about this because I think the first fund I set up, I don't know if I told y'all before, but the first fund I did back in 2011, 2012 is I did an 8-figure equity fund and we bought medical strip malls.
Yeah.
That's literally what we did. And we were in Arizona and Mesa, Chandler, Goodyear. I forget it was all over kind of the Phoenix MSA there. And same thesis, similar thesis, different, obviously set of circumstances, but we had tenants, the buildings we bought, they were about a third to half, or at least half vacant. A third to half occupied is what they were. And because there was no financing back then, if you guys recall, you had to pay cash. So
Yep.
it was a $2-3 million ticket per deal back then, which would have been like 10 million today, whatever it is. And you have to all cash because there was no financing. Banks were still trying to figure out what was going on with the housing mess, right? So you have to pay cash, and you basically got 2/3 of the building for free, i.e. 20, 30, 40 cents on the dollar, kind of like what y'all talking about here. So the thesis you have is incredible, pending that you get the solid leases that you're talking about here. And if you have those relationships that you have and those contacts, and you're proactively chicken and egg at the same time, you're drastically able to reduce risk. So
Yeah.
that's a
Yeah.
really cool idea.
And that's exactly right. I think, again, we're not at the point in our company's growth and development where we're comfortable buying a property and then figuring out, well, how do we lease
Right.
this? Like, we have to have a tenant in tow or agreement executed by somebody so that we have comfort, closing in on that. To that point, though, there's a lot of activity within our organization where we're trying to go further upstream in order to solidify those relationships with would-be tenants, so that we
Mm.
can then just simply match, okay, what they're looking for with a new building opportunity that we're seeking to acquire.
Nice. So, Michael, I'm curious on the back end, then, what are some of the major levers that you can pull or that you are pulling to kind of really solidify the things that Christian's talking about on the front end? Like, because there's a lot of nuances that I'm sure day-to-day investors like, well, this is easy. I'm just going to go out and do this on my own. What do I need these guys? Like, can you maybe talk to some of the nuances that are extremely, let's just say there's complexity to this, right? So what are some of the things on the back end that you do to make sure everything works well?
Yeah, no, right now in this conversation, we have Christian and myself. For our Armor Fund, we actually have a longstanding relationship with a practicing physician that's a co-GP with us as well. And I mean, this gentleman has relationships with some of the biggest surgery groups, physician groups in the state of Texas. And so he's connecting us with, these large physician groups, surgery centers, surgery groups that are looking to have very aggressive growth over the next 3 to 5, 10 years. And so when we talk about having these operational relationships with operating groups, that's constantly in the works, as far
That's a
as.
tremendous. So just so for people who don't understand what Michael just said, that's a tremendous unfair advantage because, as I understand it, when Christian or Mike are out there negotiating on a 20 or 50,000 square foot property, while they're in due diligence or while they're submitting the LOI, they can probably reach out to a handful of those physicians and be like, hey, I know you said you need 15,000 square feet. How does this layout fit? How does the location fit? How does this work? And because you're getting that feedback in real time, and that time to getting the feedback and figuring out what it's worth to them makes your ability to underwrite for price and gains and all that stuff that much more powerful, right? Cool.
Absolutely. And, even various different medical specialties, for example, like an ambulatory surgical center, for example, we know that the market rate rents for per square foot are usually between, $35 and $43. Now, to the degree that an operator can support more than that in their business because of, hey, the quality of the building, or the TI that's going to be put into it, they might even be able to support more than that. And so they're, because of the partnership and relationship with us, they might be willing to pay more than the market rate rent. Once again, those relationships are really key in that unfair advantage that you talked about as far as us, being able to have a tenant in tow and leverage these relationships for whatever makes the most sense.
I had an experience on one of our properties where people will pay you a slightly higher rent premium in exchange for you not leasing to a certain type of competitor or a certain type of person in the building. So I'm sure you're kind of alluding to that as well, because there's certain people that won't want other types of businesses near their business. And I also owned a strip mall with a bank in it years ago, and the bank explicitly, in exchange for a very generous 20-year lease, was very specific about the kind of tenants we could put in the property. And what they thought was a big deal, we used as an opportunity to be like, oh, well, I mean, if you guys need that, then we're going to need this, right? And to them, that felt like a win. And to us, it was a win too, right? So this is the different game than the multifamily game, because with multifamily, I love multifamily. Lots of money, lots of deals in multifamily. But this game that they're playing is a different game because you have less people at the table, but the conversations are typically a lot more elevated and a lot more nuanced and sophisticated. So the fact that you guys have the foresight to bring in co-GPs, partners, because it really becomes a very small but smart group of people working together to accomplish a very specific goal. So that's really cool, guys. I'm excited for you.
Another piece of this, Marcin, that Michael may touch on here in a moment is you're taking an office building and you're making it so people can sleep in it. Right? So whether it's a hotel or multifamily, potentially, we know that not every building is suitable for a conversion, but depending on what you convert it to could be extremely extensive, which is why you need an even broader team with an even more skill set, like architects and structural engineers and civil. And
as Christian made a lot of comments there about the different types of people you have on your team, how do you keep everything organized is one thing, but how do you figure out, like, just from an underwriting standpoint, which deals are even worth investigating? Because it's not as black and white as potentially buying an apartment building, right? Like you're talking about, you've got this bigger blanket of opportunities, and how do you quickly figure out if the juice is worth the squeeze or not?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question in the sense that, we certainly have our buy box of an investment criteria of what we're looking at. I think it's really the intersection of, there's some initial screening criteria, but for example, like if we know that we can buy a building, 20-40% of replacement costs, and that we have maybe perhaps 3 to 5 different exit strategies that could work for that location, we'll just leverage our relationships with the local municipality to figure out, okay, what does the community need? Do you guys need an anchor medical center in order to service the community because you guys are having to travel 45 minutes to an hour to have surgery when it could happen perhaps at a medical office building there locally? Certainly for this office conversion that we're doing north of Austin, the city definitely wanted overnight stay capability that was more upscale. They had, kind of more of a blue collar town in the sense that they needed perhaps, some boutique overnight stay capability in downtown that was seeing some revitalization, right? So, we certainly could have done value added office or put a Regis executive center there, but they really wanted that overnight stay capability. So in addition to supporting us publicly with regards to, hey, this is a great idea, and making introductions to contractors and construction companies that would give us better deals from a construction cost perspective, they themselves decided to support us with strategic investment grant money as well, right? So I think triangulating around, okay, well, we think we're buying right, but then also we need to put the right and highest and best use with regards to what the property is going to be long term.
good old fashioned buy for pennies on the dollar while you're doing your due diligence. Make sure which of the 3 or 4 potential ways to make the highest and best use, and kind of make a decision from there and execute, right? Plus you have a time frame for due diligence and everything else. That makes a lot of sense. And I can tell you guys that these are the types of funds that are going to be very interesting for a lot of passive investors over the next few years, because anytime you can step into a scenario where there's pain or distress and have a viable way through, and pair that up with an opportunity for investors, you guys are going to be busy, especially the next couple of years. So maybe to finish off here, guys, what is your crystal ball say? Like, what are you guys doing over the next 12, 24 months? Like, what's the goal? Are we doing deals? Are we raising money? Are we doing both? Like, walk us through that.
Yeah, I certainly don't want to jinx it, but we recently received an LOI for a significant capital infusion that would take care of the entirety of our capital raise for this fund, as well as for the follow-on fund, which we're targeting $100 million. So I can't specify exactly what that looks like right now, but just suffice it to say that we may not have to raise any more capital right now in the near term from retail investors out of necessity. We do have a heart for and want to continue to make opportunities available for not accredited investors so that they can become accredited, or simply for currently accredited investors who these deals would normally be out of reach and they wouldn't have visibility. We still want to do that, but it's not going to be a significant portion of what we do going forward. What that means, having that amount of dry powder, what that means is that these deals that are in our pipeline now, that admittedly we've had to play sort of air traffic control, wanting to land one plane, one deal while we prepare for the next one and have to raise the capital for that one right behind it. We've been doing a little bit of that because, contrary to sort of how you ideally want to do a fund where you spend a bit of time raising the capital, then deploying it, and then harvesting later on, we've sort of been building the plane and flying it at the same time, if we're honest. And that's simply because deal flow, for there's different log jams in the process, right? And so at varying points in time, there can be a lot of deal flow and other times there's not. And so we found ourselves in a point where it's like, man, through these relationships that we talked about earlier, we've got so much deal flow, but we need capital to make sure that we're able to absorb all of that. And now that we've got the capital coming in, it's like, all right, we can really start to deploy it. And now we sort of come into a capital allocation role across a portfolio of assets that through our partnerships can be the business plan for each one can be executed. And so that's really where I anticipate us going here, Marcin, is really scaling and building our team to a point where we've got the deal flow, we've got the capital now to sort of match that. Now we have to make sure that we're executing, effectively and providing Michael the support that he needs in order to do that very well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And the fact that you guys have already kind of mentally plotted out a lot of those steps, just backfilling and filling in the blanks is going to be I don't want to say the easy part, but it'll be the simpler part. Let's call it that. I mean, the hard work is the things that you guys have already done over the last few years. That's really exciting. Now, at the rare opportunity that investors are able to potentially work with you guys in the context of, a co-investment or a passive investment, what is the best way for them to learn more about you guys, what you're doing, the Armor? By the way, that Armor acronym, I love that. I think it's fantastic. And it just suits you guys so well. So what's the best way for people to engage with you guys?
So our website is just redeeminvestments.com. So go to our website. We have a link to a page called Invest With Us. And there you can, get access to our Armor investor formula, and opt into our investor club, get communications on what we have, get more familiar with what we're doing in the space. So just go to our website and you should be able to opt in there.
Excellent. Well, Michael, Christian, it's been a pleasure, gentlemen. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the tenacity you guys have tackled this thing with, and your generosity to share with what you're doing.
And on behalf of both of us, Marcin, I want to thank you for your support. I mean, being part of your community and your program has been amazing for us. And we feel like we're just at the sort of the beginning phases of that, despite having some very early success here, and just hopefully be able to carry that forward. So thank you for all that you do. Appreciate it.